Hi, this is Vincent Hammer from Exocad. I was going to show you a couple of little things that have changed in autorelief. I just did a long video explaining why it's there and how it works in more detail, but there have been some shortcomings that have been fixed and will be available in an update soon. Or if you are available to do some beta testing, you can get an intermediate update, or you can request one from me directly. Okay, so a couple of months ago, build 245, it was finally brought to my attention that this slider here doesn't work. So if you turn everything off in autorelief and you set this to, let's say, 20 microns, and you do save for build, you still get 35 microns. If you turn it to 0, you still get 35 microns. Only under the major connector, by the way. So that has been fixed. It was a silly problem. We used to have more sliders there, and I combined them, but I made a mistake. So the major connector, relief under the major connector was not changing. Okay, so it's finished. So I had set it to 20 microns. I've also loaded it up in MeshLab and set this central bar here at 20 microns. And you can see from the histogram that everything is very close to that. So that works. Let me also just show you, if you want to turn autorelief completely off, you could of course, set the other slider here to 0, but you can just as easily just turn it off here. Let's just double check that that works correctly. Okay, this one is finished. So for this comparison, I've loaded it in ExoViewer, which is a little quicker than MeshLab, and if you flip it over, you can see that the meshes coincide. This is the typical pattern you get when the meshes are mainly on the same surface but have different triangulation. Okay, so now let me show you something that is probably of interest. There have been a few people trying to get rid of the gap that will show up here. So if everything is working correctly and you're using the default settings for autorelief, you could end up with a gap here that is around 100 microns. And I mean, most people have not complained about this, but several people have been noticing this, and they don't like it. So let's. I actually put in something a while ago, also in build 245, as an experiment to get rid of that. So let me show you how to go about doing that. So we'll go to Settings and open the User Preferences. And popped up over here. There are two preference settings that I add. This is AR means autorelief. So autorelief edge, 0.5 millimeter, autorelief edge fall off, major connector, 0.5 millimeter. These things will probably end up in the UI, but at the moment, from build 245 onward, you can set these in your user preference file, like I just did here. So let's close that. We have to restart. Okay, it's been reloaded. I'm going to delete the constructed part. So let's see. We're going to turn on autorelief settings. Let's just keep the defaults here. So one other thing I want to show you quick. Michael Enger had a clever trick. You look over here, right? We have the different settings for clasps in autorelief. Clasps are identified with the clasp curves, and I've posted a video earlier where the clasp rest, this area in here inside the clasp. Since it's free-formed and it doesn't use the curve, it wasn't being correctly identified, so we have some offset there. So the quickest workaround there is to just add a tiny little clasp curve in there. It doesn't even need to be more than the wax; it just needs to be applied as a clasp. And so you could also do the same thing around the edge here of the major connector, and that does work. But there is a potential issue with that. Let me just quick show you. I'm just going to put a little bit of a curve in here, and I'm going to, let's see, clicked on the wrong one. Make a minuscule clasp on it and apply it. So now this, you can see in here the the curve. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see, is it correct in here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's actually another shortcoming. Anyway, so the curve is identified as a clasp curve, and that means that autorelief will recognize the area around that as belonging to a clasp. And that's a trick to work around certain issues where if you want to have that offset differently. But let me show you what the issue with that is when we apply it. Okay, it is done. Let's flip it around and see what we got here. Okay, so you can actually already sort of see the edge showing up that I've added, in part because the auto relief setting is pretty aggressive. But what you notice is that this has a pretty nice fall off to it, whereas the clasp area here does not. Initially, we didn't care about little edges like this at the bottom of the partial because when you printed it, they would disappear. But nowadays, that's no longer true because, first of all, if you mill it, it will definitely show up. And printers are much better than they were before. So 4 or 5 years ago, when people complained about this, we just told them, well, don't worry, you won't see it in the final partial. But now it's there. So I think using this other technique is better. At least it is a smoother edge. So let's take a look quickly in Exocad and see what this looks like. So I can just go over here and reload. And okay, so you can see now this edge. It's not doing the edge where it overlaps with the mesh. It's something we could consider adding if you want it. Right now I only look for the edge of the major connector where it's not connected to anything else, so sort of the outer exposed edge. And then I apply that little bit of fall off there. You can, of course, also change these settings. Obviously, I chose 0.5 millimeter because I'm assuming that it's better to have this fairly thin. The risk is, of course, when you have this coinciding with the surface as it is, I would imagine it's more likely that you would have some sort of fit issue. But if it's really thin, you can just sort of work that away. You can probably find where that is occurring. This is a much safer approach than turning off auto relief under the whole major connector because it's going to be much harder to tell where the problem is coming from. Okay, so I have loaded it up here in regular Exocad and sectional view, and you can see here the how it's touching or coinciding with the scan mesh, and how there's a nice taper. And if you move this in and out, you can see how that follows. You get this constant ramp here, which is nice and smooth. Also, if you're curious about why this distance isn't static, but it varies, you can check out my previous video that explains the dynamic offset that's being added. Okay, thank you very much.